my favorite family moment was taking something full circle. And if I had to title this podcast, it would be Full Circle. Because when I saw that first show on the original River Tour, I had just turned 18 years old. And on the River Tour in 2016, my son was 8 months prior to his 18th birthday. And we saw Bruce Springsteen not just in the same city, we saw him in the same building. That's unbelievable. Unbelievable. It's been upgraded a little bit, but the same brick, concrete, whatever, it's the same structure. And that was quite a moment for me. And he played for 3 hours and 25 minutes that night. And as my son said it best, my feet were about to fall off at the end of that, Dad.
Jesse Jackson, how are you? It's Terry Smith from Music Talks in the UK. Just calling in to send my heartfelt congratulations on reaching 1,000 episodes of Setlisting Bruce. Podcasting has been an unexpected joy for me, and frankly, it's one of the best things I've ever done. As I never tire of telling people, I would never have done this if it wasn't for your inspiration, your support, and your encouragement, for which I will always be eternally grateful. Music Talks will hit its 5th anniversary in June next year, and that will be my 100th episode. The fact that I'm calling to say congrats on 1,000 episodes just beggars belief, particularly when you bear in mind that you actually have a full-time job and a family and you've had some serious medical challenges to deal with in recent years. It's just the most amazing achievement. And I would say I don't know how you do it, but actually I think I do. And it's sheer hard work and determination. The fact that you drove home, I think it was from the Dallas gig, and then in the early hours of the morning did a brilliant review of the show on YouTube, which was a delight for me and so many other people. I think that just says it all. But you know, quantity is one thing, but you also do quality. Have I listened to all 1,000 episodes? No, but I've listened to a fair few. And this is where I think there's a connection with our great hero, because at every Bruce show, at some point, I will turn to Laura and I will say, he's not dialing it in, is he? You know, he's not just going through the motions. And I've never heard you dial an episode in, Jesse. And that, I think, is a fantastic achievement. So congrats on 1,000 episodes. I look forward to celebrating 2,000, but I do hope that you get there a little slower. And I say that for 2 reasons. 1, I'd like you to look after yourself. 2, it would make the rest of us feel just that little bit better. Anyway, you enjoy this milestone, my friend, and look forward to speaking to you soon. Take care.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to a new episode of Set Listing Bruce, your podcast all about Bruce Springsteen, his music, and mostly his fans. I am your host, Jesse Jackson. Joining me after post-Springsteen vacation, post-COVID, my first episode in March as I'm recording, and I am so thrilled to kick me off in March is Kevin. Kevin, thanks for joining me.
Jesse, I'm thrilled to be with you.
Yeah, tell us a little about yourself.
Well, thanks. I say hello to you, and of course, hi to the Bruce fans that are listening and music fans that are listening. I grew up in Rochester, New York, and lived in Massachusetts for the last 30 some odd years, and
Okay.
I've been a Springsteen fan since 1980 was the year for me.
Okay.
Where it just kind of clicked in. I'm in the fandom. Prior to that, the hits,
Yeah.
the songs on the radio, but in 1980, I'll tell you more about that in a minute. That
Yeah, okay.
really clicked in, and there was no going back.
Okay.
I love so much about being a Springsteen fan, especially collecting bootlegs and
Yeah, I want to
Um,
get into that. That'll be
mhm.
interesting.
Yep. And I'm also a father of two.
Okay,
Uh, Shout out to my kids, Kelly and Matthew. And Matthew has seen Springsteen now as well. And
good.
the favorites are "Darkness on the Edge of Town" is not just my favorite Springsteen album.
Yeah,
It could be my favorite album, period,
okay.
any artist. And song "Racing in the Streets."
Speaks to
So
you.
yeah, yeah. So
All right.
we'll dig
We
into
will
that a
get into
little
that.
bit.
All right, so
And
I always like to start at the beginning. So you said you grew up in Rochester. You've lived in Mass. Where talk about growing up and what kind of music did your family listen to when you were younger?
well, there was always something playing. Um,
Okay.
Lots of soundtracks. Frank Sinatra. There was the '60s classic crooners. There were the Beatles. There were these vocal groups like the Fifth Dimension. And then as you came into the early '70s, there was all that music. Carole King. There was Motown. There was um, all these incredible things that was mashed up on this old device called a radio, if you can
Yes.
imagine such a thing, where you would be able to turn that dial and find a song to your liking and just leave it there. Um, and all of that was in play when you listen to a couple of radio stations.
Yeah. Did were were your family big fans of music? Did you talked a little bit about the crooners and everything. Did they did other pop music as well kind of pique their interest?
Yes, and it showed up in the form of movie soundtracks.
Okay.
Very big in the '60s. I think they've always been big, but
Yeah.
movie soundtracks were the thing, whether it be West Side Story or any other movie that was prevalent at the time.
Mhm.
The movie soundtracks really found their way into my household, and my sister, Maureen, loved Broadway. So the Broadway shows started coming in, and so how that affected me was the theatrical essence of music was brought to me through that. I didn't probably realize at the time that it was happening,
Yeah.
but there is a Springsteen connection there, as you know.
Sure. So, as you're getting into teenage, high school, what kind of music were you listening to? And you mentioned about 1980, but
Mhm.
before then, what was a young Kevin banging to in high school?
Well, that's what it is. A lot of great influences
Yeah.
in the mid and late '70s. And I started playing guitar back then, and I still play as a hobby now. The three guys that really impressed me were Peter Frampton, Joe Perry of Aerosmith, and Davy Johnstone from Elton John's band.
Okay.
And they all played the Les Paul,
Okay.
and big black Les Paul, and I loved their sound. And there were so many others I got into back then, but progressive rock, I was into everything really, if it was done well.
What year did you graduate high school?
1980.
Okay, so I'm 77, so we're comparable, right? You were a freshman when I was a senior.
Yep.
And so yeah, I mean it is I think everyone in America before they owned Born in USA, you had a Frampton Comes Alive 8-track, right? I mean, the
Absolutely.
world had a Frampton Comes Alive 8-track, right?
He's one of my heroes. He really, I think, showed me and so many others, Jesse, what a rock concert was supposed to look like and how it was
Yeah,
supposed to feel.
yeah.
Well, the feeling that that album gave me and so many others that I've chatted with about him um, is very profound.
Yeah, it really is. And so you graduated high school in 80. So you mentioned your first show in our notes, but
Hmm.
is that what, because 80 we get, I guess, um, we're getting the river, the
Hmm.
first Hungry Heart, we get radio. It talk to me about when you discovered Bruce in a bigger way, and what about him spoke to you, if you can tell,
I
if you
sure
can
can.
articulate it?
There were two data points for me back then, and I would put the timeline after the Darkness tour ended
Okay.
and before the river came out. I used to work at a gas station, and this girl would come in and playing Springsteen,
Okay.
and I would hear her radio and I would chat with her, and she'd tell me she saw the Darkness tour, and she said, Kevin, you have to go. You cannot miss him the next time he comes through. So that was one data point. And then a friend who lived across the street from me, his name is Mike, he told me the same thing. And then it all magically happened in the fall of 1980. The River Tour was announced. And to that point, Jesse, I had seen some really fantastic bands. I had
Okay.
seen, that are still playing today, interestingly enough.
Right.
REO Speedwagon, Rush, ZZ Top, Heart, Cheap Trick. I mean, these are big time
Sure.
bands. And
Absolutely.
um, we got tickets, and when the tickets went on sale, that was my first real sense of how big this was going to be. And in Rochester, in the Wayback Machine, Bruce was scheduled to play this little tiny building that was the home of an American Hockey League team that fit about 7,100 people for a hockey game. I don't know how many people were there on December 2nd, 1980, but it couldn't have been much more than that because the floor had seats. It wasn't general admission.
Okay.
And so let's just say it was 1,000 more.
Okay.
So just around 8,000 people. And I had never seen anything like it in my life to that point. And arguably, I still haven't seen anything like that night. After that, it was no going back. And not that Bruce owned everything musically for me, but he directed it. He sent it in that direction, and I just never looked back.
Kevin, I talk about this a lot, that I think there's two kinds of people. The people that go to their first Bruce show and go, boy, that was long. And the people that
Mhm.
go, that say, oh my goodness, what what did I just see, and how can I get this again? And that's, my first show wasn't to 2002. And I had that feeling because I had not done my homework. I didn't know as many songs on the Rising as I should have, but it was there. And it was like, I, I've told this often. I felt like I'd walked halfway into a movie, and I knew it was a really good movie. But I was like, I'm eager to see the first part of the movie now. I want to understand everything I'm seeing. So that's great. I love that story. What was next step? Okay, you saw him live. Did you start, okay, hey, I've got to go find other albums this guy has done?
Yeah, I went right into the back catalog, and um, I think the first one I bought after that show was Greetings, and because they played, I mean, that night, it was just an unbelievable, you know, wealth of riches that night. But um, so many songs from Greetings um, were in there, and I just had to have it. I just needed to hear that, um, including, and then the next album after that was Born to Run that I
Yeah.
bought in physical form. So, um, I think all of those brought back the memories, but you know, again, we have to put it in context. I think it's really important, especially for a show from the original River Tour. There were no phones. There was barely any. No one even thought about video. So the feeling in the house that night, Jesse, was all of the energy was focused solely on the stage. Every eyeball was looking at the band. And I remember that night I had seats on Steven's side of the stage. And so I had a direct view of him and Roy Bittan looking straight across at Bruce and Clarence. But what impressed me so much was Max, just all night long, just giving it. Um, and I'd never seen a drummer play like that. So,
Yeah.
um, and I knew I had to see him again, like you said, and that I wouldn't have to wait too long for that. Um, but
What was
just
the
like
next show?
The next show was on the Born in the USA tour, and it was in Saratoga Springs, New York,
Okay.
where um, the Rochester show had a little, one of those moments where I learned a lesson. And I showed up at that first night. I saw someone that I knew, and he said to me, "What time did you get here? Did you see it?" And I said, "What do you mean?" And he said, "Bruce came out and did a sound check, and he played 3 songs." I missed it, of course. At the Saratoga Springs show, me and my friends showed up early, and it poured rain all day. And we get in there. I'm like, okay, we're here early, but nothing's going to happen, right? About 20 minutes after we got settled, we see people moving around on the stage, and he comes out with the band and plays Who'll Stop the Rain. And I practically fainted at that moment, and the rest of the show was phenomenal too. But I was like, oh, I saw a sound check, and he did that for all of us fans. So that was pretty cool.
So that's one thing I've missed. I've never gotten a sound check, little preview. Um, so yeah, that would be a special moment. I think that's really, really cool.
Hmm.
All right, Kevin, I like to preface this with the amount of times you've seen Bruce is not a fair barometer of how big of a fan you are, but have you counted? And if so, what's the number?
I have, and it's number 13 right now. We are at 13, and they are spaced out, Jesse, with kind of a nice balance of from the 80s. And then I took a little break and I reconvened for the reunion tour in Boston. And there was a lot of stuff in life that happens, and sometimes that can get in the way.
I was
But
going to
the
say kids,
kids, yep,
marriage, kids. Yep.
yep, yeah. And so those things you just kind of roll with it. And um, but the reunion tour I only saw the one show, but what a night it was. And that show was the only time I've ever seen Meeting Across the River and Jungleland played back to back.
That's pretty cool.
Hmm.
Uh, have you seen anything on this tour, or do you have plans to go on this tour?
Well, I have plans to go. My night is in Albany, which is about an hour and a half west of where I live. Um, and it's a great, in the Northeast, we get shows in Albany, in Connecticut, in Boston, and New York City. So you can pretty much, based on your schedule, find one that fits. And in this case, tickets sold out so fast. Um, I hope no one listening will share my secret, but I'm going now to the non-destination cities more than ever, more than ever, because it seems like the tickets are available, but they're also, I think it just works out that they're some of the better shows.
Um, I I think there's a lot to be said for that. There has been, I feel like a lot of times I'm the lone voice, and that's not true. There's other people, but I feel very much kind of the cheese stands alone where I talk about, you know, we can't make everyone happy. There is no way you can build a church big enough for Easter. There is no way they can have enough shows so that every fan gets to go to every show they want in the section they want, right?
Hmm.
Um, and and I do think um, there is, you make a choice and you have to decide when or force. Um, Kevin, when they came live, I bought um, I bought Dallas tickets and I bought Tulsa tickets, and I paid about 180, 190 each ticket.
Hmm.
Um, Now Tulsa I ended up not going to because I got COVID, but tickets were going for 40, $50. And if I had waited, right, I could have done that. But you have to take the chance. What if they aren't tickets available, right?
Right.
And so I think as a fan, you make that decision. I may overpay, but then I know I have them, or I'm going to wait and gamble that they'll be more reasonable, and then I will see them, right? And I'm going to be happy either way.
That's true.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think now I'm cut from the same cloth as yourself. I wanted to ensure that first one, and now we'll see how it plays out. Um, Now that the stadium dates have been announced,
Yeah.
um, I'm certain that I'm going to go to the first night in Foxborough.
Are you going in spoiler free, or have you been following the set list?
I'm going in spoiler free.
Oh, good for you.
And I'm really trying hard to just stay away from it. And I really hope for um, some songs that have never been played live, whether it be from Western Stars, from Letter to You, or Only Strong Survive. And I don't know what he's going to do, and that makes it really fun. Um, I of course hope for maybe one that I've never heard.
Yeah.
Um, the tops on my list would be Streets of Fire and Something in the Night. Would those two come to mind? But anything is good. It's a real blessing, I think, in retrospect, and all of us now have the perspective of the pandemic. To look and say, "Boy, this is really thrilling to be able to do this at all," and that the band members have made it through as well.
Yeah, I was lucky enough. We were in Houston on February 10th. We were in Dallas February 10th. We were in Houston February 14th. Then I was in Austin February 16th. Was planning to go to Tulsa on the 21st, and then Friday night after coming back from Austin, I didn't feel good, and Saturday morning I tested positive for COVID.
Hmm.
And I will honestly, my wife applaud me. I didn't even think about going. I'm like, no, I have COVID. This is one. Even if I felt like going, this is totally irresponsible. So we ended up giving our tickets to Tulsa away to someone. And I did tell them, and I don't think it's going to happen, but I said I would love for them to tell me about the show, right? Like I'm not charging anything for the tickets, but you could send me a voicemail, an email, that would be that would be payment enough for me. I have loved it. I will not spoil anything away. I think it is a very tight show. I
Hmm.
think I think he is telling a story. I think this is, how on Broadway he weaved a narrative, in Western Stars he weaved a narrative. I believe this show so far he is weaving a narrative about his career and life, and and beginnings and endings. So I can't wait to hear you. I would love to have you back, and we can talk more in depth about the set list.
Yeah, it's got to be exciting. And I'm the type of person, Jesse, where if I accidentally find out something, I'm not upset. It's it's just that show is going to comprise so much, and
Yeah.
it's going to mean so much to everyone
Yeah.
in the audience.
Yeah.
So it'll be fun. But this will be, a throwback for me. Not knowing anything going into a show is hard to do.
It really is. So I applaud you, and that's why I'm glad I asked. Um, so you mentioned you started collecting bootlegs. Talk about how that started and give me a little bit more of that story.
Oh, Jesse, this is one of the most joyful things. And um, kind of by accident, you learn about their existence. And so we're talking about, the radio broadcasts and um, maybe a recording that someone leaked out of the studio. Um, there was one bootleg I remember with a red cover that's now long gone that had Thundercrack on it. And it was just phenomenal. I had purchased from a flea market a, I think it was a 6 LP vinyl bootleg, Live in the Promised Land, which was Winterland 1978. And I played it so much I had it memorized. Now, here we are, fast forward in our modern technology. It's now an official release through live.brucespringsteen.net. And I hope you find this humorous. I have not purchased it. Uh, and I know there's some pathology there, but I don't want to mess with the memories. It's
Yeah.
it was really something because opening that bootleg, the radio announcer from Seattle, I think, was opening the show, and here's the introduction from the stage. We'd like to thank all our member stations. It was a fascinating listen, and
Mhm.
Bruce was just on fire. So many rarities, including The Fever by Southside, and I just couldn't believe I was listening to a live recording of Springsteen because one did not exist as an
Right.
official release. Um, so I had all those, and then in the modern day, I would go to the usual sites where I educated myself on how to acquire bootlegs or to download them. And I had quite a collection, and I still do. I've calmed down a little bit now in my old age, but I love them. And the official releases are kind of supplementing that
Right.
um, so that I can really appreciate what how Bruce would want us to hear those shows. That I think that's my big takeaway of his archives releases.
Yeah. Um, I do think it is a gift, and I realize we're having to pay for it, but there is a beauty of hearing that. Like, my first show was in Dallas, 2002.
Hmm.
The Rising Tour. The rumor is they just had crappy recordings. They're not going to do that. But I would love to hear an official release or even a bootleg of 2002 in Dallas, right? To hear that first show, to capture that magic of being there again would be just amazing. I totally get that.
I have hope for you, Jesse, and for the other fans of the Rising Tour that was so special to so many. And the reason is they released that show from two shows from 1977 from Albany, New York, and Rochester, New York, where none existed for the longest time.
Okay.
So I think they're out there. They just need to come to the surface.
Okay. We can hope so. Very
I hope
nice.
so.
You mentioned how much darkness means to you. Let's talk a little bit more about this. What what about darkness speaks to you, and what are some of your other favorite albums and songs?
Oh, boy, it's a great question. We could talk for hours on this one.
Yes.
Darkness, for me, is just everything. The lyrics, the feeling, the sounds. Bruce in general and the E Street Band was just so different from me, where guitar wasn't the feature instrument. It's the second or the third level instrument.
Right.
And you've got piano and you've got saxophone taking the solos and you've got harmonica. I just loved everything about it. But ultimately it's the songwriting.
Okay.
The songwriting is what spoke to me. Um, Darkness as a theme. Um, I've thought about this for decades, of course, as most people have, but it's so focused, so utterly focused. And now I have the promise with all the sessions music and everything, but it's it's so focused in that area. It just rises it to another level. It doesn't stray here or there. Um, and you cannot imagine, can you imagine an album where Promised Land, Streets of Fire, Prove It All Night, and Darkness in the Edge of Town are on the same side of music?
Yeah.
Um, it's just always been a great listen for me. Um, and of course, that bootleg that I told you about a few minutes ago supplements that fascination with that era. The other albums that I love, the Joshua Tree, um, is way up there for me.
You mentioned
Um,
you're also a big U2 fan.
yeah, I've seen them live more than I've seen Bruce,
Okay.
and I've gone to Dublin to see them. I've seen Bruce in New Jersey, so um,
Okay.
seen both in their home on their home turf, so to
Yes.
speak. And so I love their music. Um, I love jazz as well. Sonny Rollins, Miles Davis, Coltrane, all of that stuff is, it gives you a feeling of quality music and the musicians that were making it. The ensemble playing by the E Street Band also fascinates me on the Darkness album. But at the cherry on top of all of it is Racing in the Street.
Yeah.
I'd never heard a song like it that described that feeling of a man who comes home from work and his first thought isn't on his family, isn't isn't turning on the television. He wants to go out and drive that car. And
yes,
boy, what a feeling.
Mm-hmm. There's something I want to ask you, but I can't without spoiling you. So,
I would do it. I recommend doing it.
Yeah, no, I'm good. No, I mean, there is a in the current tour, there is a where I think the E Street Band turns into a jazz ensemble. And so I'm just going to leave that out there, not say anything else. And then when you come back, you can go, Jesse, I know what you were talking about. Or you could say, I think you're full of S. That wasn't happening at all. You kind of mentioned talk to me about are there obviously Western Stars, Letter to You, the new covers album, but you mentioned already, but what are the 3 or 4 songs that you're chasing that you would, if you hear this live, you're just going to, scream in happiness?
Yeah, I love that question. I think one of them is definitely She's the One.
Okay.
That is a special song for me. I think for all the other songs on Born to Run, I've seen them live, and let me just make sure that yes, that's the case.
Okay.
So I'm definitely chasing that, and then I'm chasing Factory.
Okay.
Streets of Fire.
Okay.
Something in the Night. I had chased for the longest time, Jesse, Stolen Car.
Okay.
Because on that show in 1980, he did not play it that night.
Right.
But I finally saw it in 2016 when he played the full album.
Full repertoire. Yeah.
Yeah, it's incredibly satisfying when that moment happens, and
yes.
I'm sure it's happened for you and many of your listeners.
Yeah.
There's others. I mean, I think I wouldn't mind hearing a Nebraska song again in the set list. I think it's a good moment in time to summon up the spirit of Nebraska and without getting too much into what's going on in the United States, because you have an international listenership. I mean, it can happen anywhere, and Nebraska covers a lot of topics that need to be talked about.
Yeah, in a lot of ways, I think Western Stars is a spiritual, almost a theme sequel to Nebraska. Nebraska was a collection of short stories. Western Stars is very much a collection of short stories. Let's talk about Western Stars Letter to You. What are your thoughts on it? What are your feelings? And let's go ahead and throw in the cover album. Only the Strong.
I loved Western Stars. I thought this album was just amazingly played, written, and put together. I mean, to perform it, the way that he did, it just blows my mind. The feeling of the Western, frontier. Mission accomplished, from when I listen to those songs, and Wayfarer, Tucson Train, Sleepy Joe's Cafe, all of those songs. So big success. I'd love to hear 1 or 2 of those. I mean, here we have a set list that I'm now expanding his show to the 4-hour mark.
Exactly. Yes.
Letter to You. a fantastic project. Um, mm, I love that it sounds so live in the studio, and
Yeah.
they really did a great job with that. I loved it, and the new album, I found it very interesting. This is some of the music that inspired Bruce to begin to be a musician in the first place.
Right.
And I, there's a couple of standouts for me. One of them is Night Shift. Night Shift is a fabulous song, that version. And then he recorded my favorite Diana Ross and the Supremes song of all time, "Someday We'll Be Together."
Oh, how fun.
And I I practically fell off my chair when I saw that was on the album, and then I listened
Yeah.
to it. It's really interesting to hear a man sing it.
Yes.
It's a really interesting perspective. I thought it was well worth recording, and there were some great takeaways there from that listen.
Yeah. One of my favorite songs is Will You Still Love Me Tomorrow?
Yep.
And like to hear Dave Mason, a guy, sing that song from that perspective really changes the tone and the mood. So yes, it was I think the album made me smile, right? It was fun. And I think in today's, and I'm gonna sound like a crappy old man, a grumpy old man, right? But in today's environment, if something can bring you happiness, if it can bring you joy that doesn't hurt other people, go for it, right?
Hmm.
And this was, it is, you put that in the player, and you're driving, and it's just fun to hear the songs.
It
I
is. It
agree.
is. It is fun. There's another great musical takeaway from this
Yeah.
is that every musician like Bruce
Yeah.
evolves. He's still evolving.
Yes.
And one album can't exist without the one just before it. And
Yeah.
they build on each other. And I think a great example of this is the Sessions band album. The Seeger Sessions was so creative. He worked with other musicians.
Right.
He learned a lot from them, and I'm certain that it affected his writing both musically and lyrically. Taken away from that, and in addition to having Charles, in that band as well.
Right.
um, that's the one tour that I regret missing. I really, really regret missing it.
You and I are in sync with that, Kevin. I heard the CD and I liked it, but I've gone on record. I think the biggest problem I had is my father used to sing these songs,
Hmm.
Erie Canal, Froggy Went a Courtin', and Bruce did not sing them the way my dad did. So therefore they sounded wrong to me, because all, respect to Bruce, my dad, as I was a little kid. So it didn't come anywhere close to Dallas. I didn't think about traveling. And then when I saw Live in Dublin, the DVD, and I went, oh my goodness. And
Yeah.
one of my best friends said, he is not, he says, I am not a spiritual person. He said, but I will tell you, the closest I've ever been to a church was at the Seeger sessions, hearing that band perform. He said, I felt like I was in a worship service,
Hmm.
and in just the power and the magic of music. So yeah, it is on my regrets too. I
Yep.
would have loved to have seen that.
Yep. And thank goodness we have Live in Dublin
Yes.
uh, to listen and to watch.
Yeah. And
It's
and
incredible.
they posted a lot of the videos from the New Orleans Jazz Fest too, which get to see, which was so powerful that Bruce was involved, right after Katrina and everything.
Hmm.
So, what's next for you in fandom? What have you not gotten to do that you want to do?
I'd love to see Bruce in another country. I've
Yeah.
never seen him, and that country could be Ireland or Germany. It could be Canada.
Yeah.
But I'd love to see how fans outside of the United States react to him. Um, I always like whenever I'm going to any show for any artist, I like to have a little bit of buffer of fans in front of me. I almost don't want to be near the front because I want to see how the fans respond to the artist. And that's really part of the fun for me. and seeing in another country, especially where they don't speak English, like Germany,
Yeah,
would be fascinating.
I agree with you. I think that would be a blast. Um, a friend of mine, Mark Dempsey, talked about he always loves to get a pit ticket, and he says that during the show he stares at Bruce. He says, "I never take my eyes off Bruce till Born to Run," and he says, "Born to Run, I turn my back to Bruce and I just stare at the audience
Yeah.
going crazy at that and feel that joy of them going crazy with that, song." Yeah. What should I've asked you that I haven't, Kevin? What have I missed?
Well, I think that there's a couple things.
Okay,
My favorite family moment
please.
was taking something full circle. And if I had to title this podcast, it would be Full Circle.
Okay.
Because when I saw that first show on the original River Tour, I had just turned 18 years old. And on the River Tour in 2016, my son was 8 months prior to his 18th birthday. And we saw Bruce Springsteen not just in the same city, we saw him in the same building. That's unbelievable. Unbelievable. It's been upgraded a little bit, but the same brick, concrete, whatever, it's the same structure. And that was quite a moment for me. And he played for 3 hours and 25 minutes that night. And as my son said it best, my feet were about to fall off at the end of that, Dad. So that was really special. And the other um, item that I wanted to mention was we had briefly talked in our notes back and forth about
Yeah.
Thunder Road
Yeah.
and the Mary question.
And I'm going to end that. So I will end the podcast with that. So we'll get that. I want to talk to you a little bit more about your son and kind of get your thoughts again. So 2016, I asked my son, Chris, so he was probably 20, no, I guess 25, 26. I'm trying to think. And he said, "Yeah, I'll go to the show with you." He had no interest in seeing Bruce,
Mhm.
but he's like, "I'll go to Oklahoma City with you, Dad. We'll do a father-son trip." So we drove up from Dallas. We had tickets to the river. He didn't want to know beforehand what it was. And so we go to the show, and it was a good show. And so we're afterwards and I'm walking. I said, "Well, do you want to go get a drink? Do you want to go to a bar somewhere?" "I think I just want to go back to the hotel." Like, okay. And so we get up in the morning, we're driving, and he says, "You've got to come with it if you're in Bruce's band, don't you?" I said, "What do you mean?" He says, "They don't waste any time between songs. I mean, he's finishing one song and he's counting down the next one. Like, you better bring it." And I said, "Yeah." And he was he was captivated by it, you know? And so then go for it a few months later, we ended up getting tickets to um MetLife in, Jersey, and
Mhm.
he was in there. And Chris was so he was at the Dallas show with me, and he has become this massive fan, right? Like this he started out, "I'm just going to be good to the old man." And then and his only worry was, and I love this, none of us went to Tulsa. And he said, "I don't want to make you feel bad, but Dad, if he walks out and says, 'Hey, I'm going to do Growing Up,' I'm going to be pissed off you have COVID." I've never heard Growing Up live. I'm going to be mad. And I go, "I don't blame you. I would be mad too." So your son has become a fan, I take it.
Yes, and in many of the same ways, Jesse. It's one of the great takeaways, and I'm sure that it's the same with you, is that he learned a lot about me. He learned a lot about his dad that night. And that was one of the more special things. In addition to the music, he is a musician. He plays the trumpet, so he watched Jake like a hawk. And my daughter is a singer, a performer, Broadway style shows, and she would love to see Bruce as well. Um, that's in the works, so
Good.
we're gonna try to get that going because I think she would love it too.
I think so
Uh,
too. Yeah.
and all of those things just make it a glorious time uh, to go old school. And as musicians, one of the things that my son told me is the cues, the cues that he gave the other members of the band of when to start, when to stop, when to do this, when to do that. You almost never see that in the modern world because of the in-ear monitor. And in those in-ear monitors, the musicians are hearing voices telling them verse 2, 3, 4, chorus 2. So to see Bruce do what he does, it they don't see that very often.
That's fascinating. I know um, there was discussion about, how long will this tour be?
Hmm.
And I did say that if Bruce would just add a minute between every song, it would be a longer, but he doesn't. I mean, it is just here and here and here. That is great. I just excited that he's going to get to go and see. And I love that perspective of him seeing as a musician, how's it doing? And one of my other favorite musicians is Harry Chapin.
Hmm.
And I think of that, Circle by Harry Chapin.
Yeah.
All my life's a circle, sunrise and sundown, moon rose to the nighttime till the daylight comes around. Uh, You know, I that is Circle. That must have been a special moment with that same age, same building, just must have been a special moment. I'm so glad you shared that with me.
It was. Yeah, thank you. And Bruce says it every time he goes back. Don't let them tear this place down.
That's great.
Because
That is awesome.
my sister went to the pretty well-known show right after the day after Sandy hit,
Yeah.
um, Hurricane Sandy in New Jersey, and just had complete devastation.
Yeah.
Um, and he said it again that night in that for that building. Don't ever let them tear this down. And he plays the biggest stadiums in the world, but I think he gets just as much, if maybe just a speck more of something else from those smaller arenas and the
Yes.
theaters. Um, it brings an intensity, I think, that
Yeah.
you can't find anywhere else.
He has to have favorite venues and places that mean much to him sentimentally. So yeah, that's great. I love that. Um, now I can't wait. I may have to check and see that that's a great memory. All right, before I let you go, I do end every episode with the Mary question. If you are a friend of Kevin's or you're his family and you're listening, first off, Kevin has made you very proud. You should be very happy with him. The Mary question is this. Jay Armstrong is an honors English teacher in the Philadelphia area. He recently retired, but when he was teaching, he would take the song Thunder Road and would break it apart as a poem. His high school seniors would look at the lyrics. They would talk of the imagery that Bruce explores. And then at the end of the 2 days, he would ask the question, does Mary get in the car? So, Kevin, that is your question. Does Mary get in the car at the end of Thunder Road?
Yes, she does.
Okay.
The fact that the song is an invitation is fascinating from many aspects of theater and song and music and two human beings that might be looking for the same thing. And That's why I say yes. I think Mary is looking for the same thing, and Bruce has the courage, or the person in the car has the courage to ask that question. So, Mary, climb in. It's no time for losers. We're pulling out of here to win. And that is the key thing for me, the word here. What is here? Well, for the man in the car, it might be something different than it is to Mary. But I think they both realize that the here for them is something that they're going to get out of. And they're going to do it together. And she gets in the car, they roll down the windows and let the wind blow back their hair.
That is a great answer, Kevin. I appreciate that so much. If someone wants to reach you, are you on social media at all?
Twitter is the best place, Jesse, at Kevin S2U,
Okay.
the number 2 and the letter U at the end of that.
Okay.
And the same thing on YouTube.
Okay.
And I do have some Springsteen videos from that Rochester concert that I attended with my son, if anyone's
Nice.
interested in those, on my YouTube page.
Very good. Very nice. All right. After the show, I want you to come back so we can talk about the set list, what your expectations were, how if you ended up being able to go blind, and what your feelings were. I would love that.
That sounds great. You're on.
And if you decide, if it works out that your daughter goes, if you want to do a family affair, you, your son, and your daughter, that would be great too.
It would be. Yeah, it absolutely would be. We'll see how it develops.
All right.
Their schedules now are busy, but we're going to try to make this happen.
Well, I will keep my fingers crossed for you. Thank you so much. Listeners, please keep us posted. You know, I'm always looking for feedback. I have a voicemail, 469-249-2442. If you have thoughts about the tour, if you have thoughts about the show, please leave me a voicemail and you might make the episode. Kevin, thank you. I appreciate it. Listeners, be safe, be kind, and we'll talk to you soon. Goodbye. There we go, another episode. I'm about to go through a couple of things where you can reach me and give me feedback. So if you want to skip this, I understand. But I do hope you check it out every once in a while. I'm available on Twitter at Jesse Jackson DFW. The show is available at SetListingBruce. You can send me an email, setlistingbruce@gmail.com. You can send me a voicemail at 469-249-2442. I am currently doing a few other podcasts. Perfectly Good Podcast, John Hyatt from A to Z, where Sylvan Groth and I discuss every John Hyatt song in alphabetical order. My Babylon 5 podcast is Last Best Hope for Conversation, where Lou, Karen, and I discuss every episode of Babylon 5 in chronological order. I still am doing Next Stop Everywhere, the Doctor Who podcast with my brother in time, Charles Skaggs. And then finally, How Many Podcasts, the only podcast on the internet that counts, where my buddies and I discuss pop culture. You can go to our Patreon page and support the podcast for as little as $1 a month. You can go to our Facebook page, like, and please go to iTunes or wherever you get your podcast and leave a 5-star rating and review for all of the podcasts that I'm doing. It's okay if you don't listen to them, but if you subscribe and rate, it really will make my day better. Thank you, and I will talk to you soon.
You just heard the fun talking, hard rocking, music loving, album ranking, fan thinking, joy spreading, lyric reading, story sharing podcast that is the one, the only Set Listing Bruce. The theme for Set Listing Bruce was written by David Rosen, used by permission.
And we're out. Good job, sir. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jesse. I really enjoyed this. And
thank you.
You know, you have a fantastic cadence with asking the questions. And think when you're in a conversational interview like that,
Yeah.
it's nice to make sure that someone hears the question correctly. Your cadence in speaking it is really good. So
Well, that means a lot to me. I know on your day gig, you're in sales, so it's all
yep,
about communication. And so, yeah, it makes me very happy when someone reaches out to me or afterwards and says, I was nervous and I didn't, or just this was so much fun. So thank you. That's very kind of you.